Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you're a real estate agent trying to navigate today's absolutely brutal housing market, or maybe you're a homeowner who is just deeply invested in getting your property sold, you are definitely going to want to pay super close attention to what we're covering today. We're looking at a document that perfectly captures those deep, often unspoken, and honestly, completely exhausting frustrations of our current stagnant market. Because, let's face it, it's a waiting game out there right now, and both agents and their clients are feeling the absolute burn of it. So, let's unpack exactly what is going on behind the scenes here and look at the real, hard questions we need to be asking ourselves to actually move forward. Okay, let's dive into this. Are you and your client tired of waiting for the Federal Reserve? I just want you to let that question hang in the air for a second, right? Think about the sheer lack of control that implies. The entire strategy for getting a listing sold right now often just boils down to sitting on your hands, staring at the financial news, and literally waiting for macroeconomic policy to shift. You are waiting for the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates low enough to finally attract a buyer. And it's incredibly frustrating, isn't it? To have your professional success and your client's major financial goals tied entirely to forces operating at the absolute highest levels of government finance. It is completely out of your hands. And there is just such a stark contrast between the world we actually want to work in and the world we're currently stuck in. The ideal situation? Well, it's beautifully clear. We want to attract potential home buyers who have the absolute power to confidently walk into a bank today, secure their financing without a single hitch, and get your listing sold. That's the dream scenario. But the reality? Well, the reality is being trapped in this endless holding pattern. The buyers aren't walking into the bank today because, honestly, we're all just waiting. We're waiting for the Federal Reserve to hopefully lower interest rates enough to make that ideal, fully financed buyer a reality again. So that macro-level waiting game, it creates a very real, very painful micro-level problem for agents. And that brings us to section 2, the communication drain, or the cycle of updating clients with no results. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact painful cycle you might find yourself trapped in right this very minute. As the listing agent, you know you are obligated, legally and ethically bound really, to communicate with your homeowner clients. So week 1 arrives, right? And you give your weekly update. The result? No sale. Week 2 rolls around, the market is still completely stagnant, and maybe you shift to a bi-weekly update. The result? Still no sale results. Then a whole month passes. You're dialing the phone for that month 1 monthly update, and again, you have absolutely zero progress to report. There is just this exhausting, heavy dread that comes with picking up the phone just to tell your client over and over again that nothing has changed. Now, when that communication cycle goes on long enough without a single bite, we inevitably hit our next topic, Section 3, the price cut dilemma, which leads to some of the absolute hardest conversations about value an agent can possibly have. I want you to think about the sting of these 4 words, owned, free, and clear. Just let that sink in for a moment. Your client has full equity. They own the property completely outright. There's no burdensome mortgage holding them back or forcing a strict timeline. Yet, despite being in what should theoretically be the strongest, most unencumbered possible position in all of real estate, you're both still stuck. The property sits there, free and clear, but there are simply no buyers crossing the finish line. And that incredibly frustrating reality leads directly to this really heavy, looming question. Are you considering advising your client to do a price cut since the property is owned free and clear? It is a terrible, terrible weight for an agent to carry because you know the home has inherent value. You know the client owns it completely. But the stagnant market, driven entirely by those interest rates we talked about earlier, is forcing you to seriously consider slashing the asking price just to artificially generate some kind of movement. It literally feels like you're advising them to give away their hard-earned equity simply because the current financial climate is keeping the buyers away. So, let's move along and see how this builds into our next necessary phase. Section 4, seeking alternatives and navigating beyond the waiting game. I want to ask you this directly, and I want you to really, genuinely search your professional toolkit. Do you, as the listing agent, have any other alternatives to get your client's listing sold? Are you completely out of options? Because look, if the traditional route of listing and waiting for financed buyers just isn't working, what else do you actually have? It's time to really challenge yourself to find a catalyst for a sale that doesn't rely entirely on the Federal Reserve making a move or on you making the painful choice to slash your client's property value. Which brings us to the climax of our explainer today and a really critical pivot point for your business. Section 5, a new approach. Because frankly, it is time to stop waiting. we need to force a mental resolution here. So let me fire off these two final critical questions straight from our source material. First, how long are you and your client prepared to wait in order to get the listing sold? And second, do you and your client think that it is time for a new approach? Listen, you absolutely cannot sit in the waiting room forever. The weekly updates with no results are draining you, the prospect of unnecessary price cuts is totally draining your client, and the market, well, it isn't going to fix itself overnight. So, if you answered yes to those questions, if you are entirely burnt out on the waiting, the empty updates, and that looming threat of price cuts on free and clear homes, then we arrive at this final provocative thought from the text to leave you with today. If so, please find enclosed in the PDF information how we can help you. It is time to take all that built up frustration, stop sitting on the sidelines, and actively explore the enclosed solution to finally get that listing sold. The market isn't waiting for you. So the final question is, are you going to keep waiting for the market, or are you going to open that PDF and take control of your listings today?